Radio check, radio check.
Green light, go, go, go.
Okay. Hi, guys. It's Thursday night, and I'm doing something I don't usually do, which is to chase a lap time. So let me tell you why I'm doing this and what I'm planning for this stream, so that if you decide to watch it at some point, you can choose whether it has any interest for you or not. So a little over a week ago, after I did my review of the first part of the BMR season, the one change that I made initially was to make an adjustment to my in-game steering, because I had a mismatch there and I wanted to correct that. Now, I'll be honest with you. That change has been, to this point, far more effective than anything I would have anticipated. It's too soon to say for sure how, broad of an effect it's going to have, but the first thing I did afterwards was to come to Bathurst, because that's where we were going to have our next race, right? And start doing some work there. And I think I said in that stream that I was planning on doing some practice at Bathurst to test it out. So I did that. Immediately blew away my old personal best by well over a second. Wasn't even close. Um, I switched over to Suzuka, because that's what I consider my second worst track, and we just finished our league race there. And it took me 4 laps to shave off a half a second from my personal best there. So the early returns on the steering change have been promising. I'll have a much better idea next week when we go to Zolder. Um, my best guess is that the change that I made won't have as large of an impact on the tracks that I was already more comfortable at. I think what I'm seeing here at Bathurst and at Suzuka is probably a bit of an outsize effect, because I had more room to improve at those tracks. So I'm curious, once we get to a couple of the tracks I'm more competitive at, to see what kind of effect it has. But there's no question that in the meantime, the impact at Bathurst has been significant. It's a track that has given me tons of trouble for a long time. But to the point where last night, when I was doing a practice race and I did qualifying, I ran a 202.4 for my qualifying time, and actually had a 202.1 on the delta for that lap, and just blew it a little bit coming through the elbow. But that was the first time where I'm like, holy shit, I got a 201 in my sights, and I honestly didn't think I'd ever be saying that. So I thought, you know what? Let's chase it a little bit. I don't usually chase lap times. Don't usually do much hot lapping. I tend to prefer to spend my time doing race prep, um, and looking for consistency, race pace, that sort of thing. So hot lapping just isn't really ever my priority. But I'll be honest, this one I felt like chasing it a little bit, and I thought it would be a good opportunity too because I know that Bathurst is a track that a lot of people struggle at. Um, I thought I'd use it as an opportunity as well to walk you through exactly what I'm doing here, what I'm trying to do here, and how I go about doing it. Because if I'm getting down to a 201, that's starting to get pretty solid. I think I'm humble enough to understand that that's a legitimate time, at least on console. You know, so hopefully some of the things I'm going to walk you through can help you in how you're approaching the track. If anybody watches it and has any questions, feel free to hit me up. But what I'm going to do is first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just warm up, run some laps until I can plug in a 202, something in the 202s before I really start chasing the 201. And then I'm going to do a pretty in-depth review of that lap. I know it's something Cruz wants to see, my teammate. So I'm going to spend some time doing that. If that's not your cup of tea when I get to that, feel free to just skip past it and get on to the good stuff and see whether or not I actually pull off a 201 or not. So for now, I'm just going to run some laps, warm up, and get myself going on this. I am in hot lap mode. As you can see, I've set the conditions for about as optimal as I can manage. First thing I need to change is the tire pressures. What I'm looking for is as I enter turn 2, just as I start up the mountain, I'm looking for right around 26.6 all the way around. And the fronts are dropping a bit going through the first few corners, so I want to adjust that. From the standpoint of tire pressures, there are generally specific points around a given track that I will target for specific tire pressures. So rather than just trying to set my tire pressures off of when I finish a lap, I will set them for specific turns on the track. In 26.6 is usually what I target. Anything within that range, plus or minus 1 or 2, is perfectly fine. On this track, I like to shoot for both sides to be right about 26.6 as I enter turn 2 right here. This is one thing I don't like about hot lap mode, and that's the fluctuation on the tire pressures. Not as big of a deal on some of the shorter tracks, but when you get on the longer tracks like here or Spa or Silverstone, yeah, I don't like that. Try that and see what it does.
Green light. Go, go, go.
I have that right rear completely fucked up.
Code detected.
Calm down, idiot. Just warm up and run some laps for Christ's sake. Screwed it up.
Well done, mate. Fastest step so far. Well done, mate. That's all best.
First 201. Okay. Let's I think there's at least three more tenths in there without making any setup changes. Um, okay, so what I want to do now is I want to walk through in detail what it is that I'm doing and trying to do on this track, what I'm trying to avoid, that sort of thing. Let's go steering wheel cam and get the HUD up. Okay, first things first, I'll do the caveat that obviously this is all for me and the Lambo, and there are going to be differences between what I do and what you do in whatever car it is that you're driving. But um, I think there are some things that you might be able to take away from this. First of all, turn one. My braking point that I'm using is really just in front of the 50-meter board. What I'm zeroing in on is so if you look to the right of the 100-meter board, there's the light post right there. The next light post past, the one right next to or just in front of the 50-meter board, is what I'm targeting for my brake marker. The closer I can get to that, the better. Um, and let me explain why. Because while I'm a big proponent of trail braking, in most cases on most tracks to at least some extent, I find that I trail brake very little into turn one and a couple of other corners as well. And the reason for that is the curbs that are at the apex. Um, the reality is they're time killers. You know, if you catch these curbs because they're so high, I don't care if you're in a Merc or a Bentley or anything else that handles curbs real well. These curbs are going to upset the balance of the car. So I find that if I brake too early and sort of take my usual trail brake approach, my tendency is to do two things really. One is to scrub off too much speed, and two is that I will have a tendency to be turning in too early and increasing the chances of catching that inside curb, which is just going to slow me down and delay my ability to get back on the throttle and full throttle. So I definitely take this corner at much more of a 90-degree um, angle than I would a lot of other similar corners at other tracks. So it's much more of a just chuck it in type approach. I'm much more severe on my inputs for this corner than I would be generally speaking. It's the best way I have found to both maintain the maximum amount of speed through the corner and to avoid the curb at the same time by by using a what I consider a very late breaking point for me. That ensures that I'm not going to come up short on my turn in. I may be a little bit late, but I can live with that under the circumstances. Because if I run a little bit wide, that's usually not the end of the world. I can catch that, and still get on the accelerator pretty quick. I may have to back off just a little bit, but it's a lot easier to deal with than it is catching that curb on the apex. So that's why I approach this corner the way that I do. And if you'll watch how quick and severe I would say my brake input is on this. There's almost no trail braking there whatsoever. So I really am just trying to kind of chuck it into the corner um, and get the car rotated so I can get straight back on the throttle. And I consider that a pretty unusual approach for me compared to most other things. Another thing I think you can watch is I'm a big proponent of being smooth, but I think that can be taken too far, I think it's a great approach and it worked extremely well for me earlier on when I was still learning sim racing. Chasing smoothness, I think that was a huge benefit for me and I spent a lot of time doing it. But one thing I think that can cost you if you get too much, if you chase smoothness too much, is being too gentle on your initial application of the brake. So if you'll watch this again, what you're going to see is you're going to see an instantaneous transition of lift of the throttle and application of the brake. I don't think there's anyone who would call that necessarily smooth, The but I think it's important for a corner like this. My my applications that I'm using, my brake, throttle, and steering are unusually not smooth for how I usually approach driving. They're much more abrupt. And watch it again, and I think you'll see what I mean. Doesn't mean I'm always. Doesn't mean that I'm not trying to obviously be precise and I suppose um, smooth in the sense that I'm trying very hard to keep the car balanced so that I can do that harsh maneuver. So it's still relatively smooth in that sense, but it's definitely not a what I would consider a standard smooth approach to that corner. My whole goal is just to maintain as much speed as possible, and that allows me to do it at that corner. Okay, coming up to turn two. This is a really weird corner. There's a lot of weird corners on Bathurst, and I'm going to show you exactly why I think this one is weird. There's a very, very narrow window that I'm trying to put specifically the front right tire in to maximize this corner. And I'll see if I can show it to you. See the front end drop right there? There's just a little hump that I'm trying to catch right there at the entry. And I'm trying to catch it with the front right tire. The the tricky part I find about this corner is that if your steering input is too severe, that it has you catching this right-hand curb, it's going to scrub speed every single time and kill your lap times. So in a way similar to turn one, I'm setting up this corner to avoid catching any of that inside curb at any point. The the tough part is that if you get wide at all, you get massive understeer, and you're going to have to wait what seems like forever before you can really put the throttle down. But if you can line your car up and position it properly, where that front right tire is just dipping down into that little hump, then the car will start to turn without you having to force it nearly as much with the steering wheel. That lets you be more gentle with your steering application. By doing that, less steering input means that you are, one, the car is more balanced. Two, you're going to be able to get on the throttle sooner. And three, you're going to be able to get on the throttle harder. So that's what I'm always chasing in this corner. So my braking point is the access road. And really, I'm really kind of aiming for at least the midway point of the access road, if not the far side of it. I'll trail brake a bit more into this corner because it's a bit larger, longer corner. One thing I want you to notice is, how do I put this? Getting the steering angle down, the correct steering input down, I think is super tricky here. And the only way that you're going to get it is through practicing it. But let's watch it for a second, see if this makes any sense. Notice how gentle the initial application of the steering wheel is. It's because in my mind, I'm not steering to make the corner. I'm steering to make that little dip in the road. You know, see if that makes sense when you watch it. Boom. If I can do that, then I know I'm both avoiding that curb and I'm staying far enough to the inside that I'm going to be able to go back full throttle and attack the exit like I really want to. I think that one, there's a lot of corners, and you'll hear me repeat this a lot on this track. It's very easy to overslow the car. So if you're chasing better lap times, one thing I would look at is ways that you can either approach the corner or change your inputs so that you are not bleeding off any more speed than you absolutely have to. That corner is a good example of it, right? I want to be, obviously the line is critical, but I want to be back on the gas as quickly as possible. And in order to do that, I have to catch that groove right there in the perfect spot. Let's see where. So I'm maybe this is my true apex right here, I would say. I think of the bump as sort of a false apex that I aim for, but then that allows the car to just kind of slide around the first half of the corner until I actually reach the apex right here. But you can see that I'm well short of the end of the red and white striping on the curb, and I'm already going back to full throttle, and I don't think I'm coming off of it. Yeah. So that's what I'm gunning for, to try to get it tucked in there into that really tight window so that I can get back on the throttle fully early in the apex. Let's see. This next corner is a super tricky one. Um, and I think what I'll do is I'm going to show this from above first. Matter of fact, I'll probably go back and do that for the entire lap when I get through it. Okay, that looks pretty straightforward from there, but as you all know, it is anything but. Um, the the really tricky part to this, in my mind, is right around here, somewhere in this range. There are a couple of dangers here. Obviously, you've got the walls on both sides, so there's the physical danger. But the danger I'm talking about is the danger to your lap time, because there are a whole bunch of ways to bleed speed from this corner right here. One, overbraking. It's super easy to overbrake here. This is one of those corners that when you're new to this track, you're almost certainly going to take this corner in first gear. That is absolutely fine. I did it for the longest time. But there comes a certain point when you're probably going to have to take this in second gear in order to really get the lap times that you're looking for. Because what happens is when you take this in first gear, you've already started going uphill. And if you shift down to first, you're adding the engine braking to the gravitational effect that the car is feeling. So you've already slowed the car before you start your turn in. Then you have the gravity of going uphill that takes over and starts slowing the car down even more. And then you shift down into first and add the engine braking in order to safely take the corner. Early on, when you're learning the track, that's absolutely appropriate to do, because if you try it in second, you're probably going to just kill yourself. But when you start getting to the point where you're looking for time, this is one of the first areas you need to look, because this corner is so hard. But I think you have to get to the point where you can take this in second gear. Second, if you overslow the car, it will encourage you to turn in early. And as I will always say, what you are looking to do is minimize the amount of speed that you're losing through the corner. The only way you can do that is to open up the corner as much as you can, brake as little as possible, and get back on the throttle as early as possible. So what happens is if you overslow, or your line is too tight and you turn in too early, you are not going to be able to keep the wheel over to the left. You're going to have to make a correction. You're going to have to make a correction both with the wheel and with the gas. You'll notice it yourself all the time when you come into this. When you enter this corner too early and you have to make that adjustment to avoid catching the wall on the inside apex, then you know you've done it wrong. And all you're doing is bleeding speed, because you have to let off of the gas, and not only is the lack of acceleration slowing you, but so is the gravity again, right? So it burns a ton of speed anytime you have to do that. So my approach, what I'm always trying to do here is my entry is to stay as much to the left of, as I can, within reason. Obviously, you don't want to put yourself into the wall over there, but you want to stay far enough to the left, to the right, excuse me, so that your turn in is late enough to be a single turn in, so that you don't have to make any corrections. Um, think of it as making your apex for this corner later than what your brain tells you you should be doing. Okay? So that's what I am attempting to do. I am always attempting to stay far enough to the right so that I have a late enough turn in and a late enough apex that that wall on the left doesn't present an issue for me and I can go back on the throttle as soon as possible. Okay? So let's back up and I'll tell you how I get to that point. So as I'm coming out of turn two, I'll move over to the right, and I think that this is probably the key right here. If you don't start getting it right here, you're never going to get it right up near the apex. So notice how you've got the cutout on the right side of the track. You've got this light pole right next to us on the right hand side, and the wall to the right of us. I am already starting my turn in here. And the reason I do that is I want my turn in for this bend to the left to be as flat as possible. Okay? What I don't want to do is I don't want to be waiting until, say, up to the cutout up there to be starting my turn in, because that gets you moving the car too much, right? You're upsetting the balance of the car more than you want to in order to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish at the apex. So I want this turn in at the bend to be as flat and narrow as possible, which is why I start turning in early, right? And it totally takes practice. I'm looking for an early and gentle turn in, which I will stop and then start backing out of as the Audi sign starts coming into view. I will have already released a little bit of the throttle at this point. As you can see down there, I'm not full throttle anymore. As I start to get towards the apex of that left-hand bend, I will start to decelerate just a little bit. And then I'll flatten out the steering entirely as I approach the Audi sign, and that's when I go on the brakes, trying to keep the car pointed over to the right side. Basically, I want to be either pointing at the Audi sign or just to the right of it. I'll go hard on the brake, but probably not as hard as what you think. If you could put it in terms of brake pressure of what I'm actually applying to the brake pedal, and understand I have CSL Elite load cell pedals, so I have load cell, not potentiometer pedals. So brake pressure is important to me. At at some of the corners on this track, like the chase, the last turn, and turn one, I consider those very heavy braking zones. Not just from the sense that I'm looking to apply maximum brake, but I'm looking to apply maximum pressure on the brake pedal. That is not the case with this. So if those corners are 100%, I'm actually probably no more than, say, 80 or 90%, somewhere in that range. That's just a guess, but it's something below my full pressure that I put on the brake pedal. Because I actually don't want to overslow the car, and I don't want to upset the balance of it too much. So it's a little bit less pressure than I would use in a quote-unquote heavy braking zone. Once the car starts getting slowed enough, then I start trail braking and applying more steering. Catching this apex at the right time is hard and takes some practice. If you if you look up to the left on the side of the hill, you see a little bush there. You might try using that as a frame of reference in the sense that, I want to turn around that bush, right? So instead of staring necessarily at the wall, which is featureless and doesn't really give you any guidance on how severe the wall bends, using something like that as a reference to help you learn exactly where to turn in and how much might help you. But the idea is that you can get the car chucked over and never have to make a correction. Now I'm straightening and I'm back on full throttle at this point, right? So that's the goal that I'm looking for. Let's back up and take it at full speed. The biggest problems you'll have from that approach are when you get the car just a little bit off balance. The back end will start sliding out on you. It'll probably bother you a lot when you first start practicing it, and it takes practice to get used to and really maintain the balance of the car properly. Through that corner. But don't be too discouraged by it. It really does take time to get that properly. Let's see. Okay, this corner is pretty straightforward. You're just going to stay full throttle through it. The curb on the right hand side, I want to be as close to it, but I don't really want to touch it. I think it has a tendency to spin the wheels a little bit and knock time off. So I'm really just trying to run right along the white line that is the track border. As you all know, there's a little bump right there that's going to make the car chatter a little bit. If you can't take this flat out, either the track is green, your tires are cold, or you have some sort of issue with your setup that probably needs to be addressed. Because as far as I know, every car in the game should be able to go flat out through this corner right here. Next corner. This is a serious thread the needle. Really is the only way I can put it. And it's tricky because it's another blind one, so it's really hard to both find references and trust what you're trying to do through this corner. The I am not trying to catch the curb on the inside. It's another one that I'm looking to mostly avoid. If I just skim the white painted line on the right hand side, that's probably about perfect. It's also another corner where I think early on you're going to take it at a lower gear than you will later on. As recently as a week ago, before I really started trusting that the steering wheel was letting me do things that I couldn't do before, I was taking this in third gear, where I would hold it in third gear, let off the accelerator to make the apex, and then shift up to fourth just past it. That is not my approach anymore. I'm fourth gear in this. If you're at a point where you have to take it in third because you don't have the confidence yet, stick with it. But it's another one where you want the initial steering application to be fairly early and gentle, I think. In other words, you don't want to be in a position where you have overshot the apex and have to turn in too sharply. So it's another one with a very small window that you have to hit in order to get it right. So we haven't hit the tree yet, and I'm already starting just the slightest bit of turn-in. Not much though. And if anything, really all I'm doing is I'm holding the turn from the previous corner. But I'm trying to keep it as gentle as I can, right up until I get to the apex where I want to hit my maximum, and then I'm already straightening the wheel and coming off or coming back onto the gas. So this is let's do full speed real quick. You'll notice that the shift up to fourth happens pretty late in the corner. What I'm finding is that the advantage of doing it this way, of going up into fourth gear and then with a slight release, is that when I was taking it in third, I was releasing the throttle a little bit in order to get the car to turn in, where I wanted it to, and make the apex how I wanted to. What I find is that by shifting up, that moment that it takes the car to shift is doing the slowing that I wanted to do. So I don't have to come off of the throttle very much at this point in order to make this apex. The natural reaction of the car to shifting up into fourth gear slows the speed just very slightly and turns the nose in just very slightly and accomplishes what I was trying to do in third gear. So yeah, you'll see me just lift just a little bit right as I shift up into fourth gear, and then I'm able to get back on the throttle. The full throttle application here, I would say, is a bit more varied than a lot of other corners because I need to know in my mind that I'm going to make it through this next turn without hitting the wall. So rather than having like a spot where I know I can shift up, or excuse me, where I know that I can go full throttle, I'm waiting for my brain to tell me that yes, you've done it well enough now that you're going to clear this next corner. So I don't really have a reference for my full throttle acceleration like I do on a lot of other corners here. This one is more feel, and it can change slightly, from lap to lap depending on how much speed you're carrying through the previous corners. But having said that, once I do get full throttle, I'm full throttle through here, and you run it up as close as you can. That just takes practice, to increase your comfort level of having your car placed in what you know is a good position so that you can get through that corner properly. This corner is one that I would say I've made a bit of an adjustment recently because of the increased confidence with the steering wheel. I would have a tendency to take this corner, I would say, narrower than I used to. I'm able to open it up a lot more than I could before. So let's see how far out I'm able to get on this. So that's about as far out as, but you can see how loaded R is. But let's see if that right side is just fully loaded up right there as you hit that little dip. And you've got just all of the weight pinned over to the right hand side. You can go even further to the right than where I am right now, but at this point, if I'm getting onto that line, I'm pretty good that I've opened the corner up just about as much as I can. This is another case where I am trying to minimize the steering input, maximize the amount of throttle that I'm using. That's why I'm out here to the right. I think that if you look back at races that I did more than a week, you'd have seen my car positioned at least probably a couple feet to the left, and that was shutting the corner down somewhat, forcing me to both lift the throttle more and take a tighter steering angle through this corner than I think is ideal. So you'll see, so I'm still full throttle right now. So when I exit that last corner, I'll let the car drift out to the right. And then when I get to this point, what I'm really focusing on is the outside wall on the other side of this little hill, because I don't want to aim too far to the inside, because that puts me in the more of closer to the middle of the track where I used to be. I want to be farther to the right than that, and I found that shifting my eyes over to the right and to the wall was a better reference for me to get the car further over to the right. So that may help you a little bit. So for instance, if you look right here, see how far off of this left white line I am at this point in the corner. I used to be, if not on it, very close to it, and I'm much further to the right now than I used to be. So I'll come over that rise, let the car drift out to the right to the white line, hold the turn in, and then this is another one where fourth gear is a good option instead of fifth gear. And I will only take fifth gear here when I am doing qualifying or hot lapping. In the actual race itself, I will stick with fourth gear on this because it's a lot safer. I won't take this in fifth gear. It's too easy to have too much speed, miss your turn-in points, catch the curb, hit the wall. So in a race, I won't mess with it. Um, I'll stay in fourth gear, and I will do a slight lift of the throttle just like I do here. When I'm in fourth gear, because I'm running in higher RPMs, I am able to keep more throttle through here than I can when I'm in fifth gear. So if you watch my race laps, you'll see me in fourth gear, but you will probably see me, at least on a good lap, not letting off of the throttle as much, maybe 25% instead of 50%, something along those lines. I very much want to avoid this curb on the left-hand side, because it's another one that's relatively high. It will kick the car to the right and put you into the wall on the right-hand side. So my eyes, where I'm trying to trace, so to speak, is not the curb but the white painted line. I use the white painted line as my reference on this track quite a bit, and avoid looking at the curbs directly, because I think you have a tendency to go where you look. So if you find yourself, having trouble hitting those marks, you might try following the white line with your eyes as opposed to the curbs themselves. Essentially, when I get to this point and I see the end of this curb, that is when I know I'm generally safe to go full throttle. At least in fourth gear, not in fifth. I've got to hold it longer. So actually, that's a difference that's worth pointing out. So as I come over this little rise here, wait, I'm not far enough. Um, and it's a race lap, right? I'd be in fourth gear right here and lifting just a little bit in order to get the nose to turn in. My eyes will go to the white painted boundary line, and I will use that to trace the front end, essentially, right? And then when I get to this point, when I pick up the end of the red and white striped curbing, that's when I know that I am clear to go full throttle. And that's when I'm in fourth gear doing a race lap. Okay, so in fifth gear, you've got to hold it for longer. Eventually, you get back on. And then I'll try to move the car over as far to the right as I can either on or right next to the red and white striping on the right hand side. This is probably my most uncomfortable corner on the track. You can see that I'll start my turning right as I'm coming up to the Marshall stand. It's another blind one, which means there's a little bit of guesswork and a lot of practice that goes into hitting this corner correctly. I know there are a lot of the true aliens will take this flat out. I'm not at a point where I can do that yet. But what I'm looking for is an initial gentle turn in so that I can get the nose pointing in the direction that I want it to point. But it's not until I get to this point and really pick up the white stripe and the curbing that's starting to appear that I really know how this corner is going to go. So it's probably the one for me that has more variation and small adjustments than any other corner, because it's not something that I have figured out a way to just nail it consistently every single time. There's just too much variation in it for me. But again, at this point, I'm using the white boundary line as an eye trace for the front of the car, releasing the gas, and again, that will vary depending on how well I've positioned the trajectory of the car. Because just like the last curb, I don't want to touch this inside curb. Some of the cars will handle this one better than what the Lamborghini can. But there's a probably 50-50 chance that if I catch this curb, much at all, that it's going to kick it hard enough to put me off into the wall. If I just barely catch it, I'll be okay. But if I catch too much of it, the Lamborghini is gone. So I'm very cautious at this point in order to keep the car just outside of the white painted line so that I can avoid the curb on the left-hand side. If you've got a car that can handle it, by all means, turn in here and attack it. This is another one where, again, when I catch sight of the end of the curbing here, that's about where I know that I have the green light to go back to full power and pull out of the corner. Okay, now we get into the downhill section. Which I personally find much easier, at least in the Lambo, than the uphill section. My guess is that's because the Lambo is a mid-engine car and has the weight towards the back. There's a good chance those of you in front-engine cars feel exactly the reverse. Where the front is carrying so much weight that the downhill section is much more problematic than the uphill section. But I'm going to talk you through it anyway and just give you an idea of what it is that I'm trying to do. So holding it in fifth gear at full throttle right until just before I hit the news sign. That's where you get the bump, and you need to be essentially done with your braking by the time you hit that bump. I want to see how much brake it appears that I'm using here. Yeah. Okay, so these next two corners are another example of where if you look at the brake trace, it is going all the way to 100. But I can tell you that my brake feel, the amount of pressure that I'm actually applying on the brake pedal, isn't nearly that much. It's just a quick, relatively light tap on the brake pedal. I think you have to be very careful here about about applying either too much brake or braking for too long, because when you start pitching the car downhill, if you're not in control of the brake pedal and the brake pressure, that's when that back end is really going to want to start moving around on you and come around and become the front. So don't let that brake trace deceive you. I'm not nearly as hard on the brakes right here as what it actually appears. As a matter of fact, I would say the thought in my head is brake as little as possible. You know, I really am trying not to disturb the balance of the car on these next couple of corners. It's just a real quick hit on and off in both circumstances. I'll drop down to fourth. As soon as the car straightens up, I'll give it a tap again and drop down to third. Move the car over to the left and onto the curb. And as soon as I start straightening it up again, then back on the brakes and down into second gear. Now you'll notice that this is really the first corner, other than maybe turn two to a certain extent, but this is the first corner that I legitimately would say that I trail brake on this track. Let's see. Let's try it at full speed and see if that makes any sense. See how much slower I'm coming off the brakes there, and holding just a touch, you know, right up into the apex itself, because I'm trying not to overslow the car. I want to keep the grip on the front side so that I can hold the front end to the right as close to this wall on the right hand side as possible, because that's what sets me up for the angle on the is it the dipper? I don't remember. This next turn, since I don't remember what it's called. Um, because getting the angle right on this next turn is absolutely critical to being able to maintain speed through it, right? So I am I am harder or more fully on the brakes for this corner than I am for the last two, where those are quick on and off dabs. This is a much more deliberate application. I still don't know that I would say that it's a full 100% brake pressure, but it's certainly closer to it. And much, much slower coming off the brakes, holding it, right? See how I'm still holding just a touch of brake right there? That's the very definition of trail braking in order to help the car get turned in a little bit into this corner. I'll give just as soon as I know I'm confident. In other words, you know, I see the track start to part in front of me. Then I'll pull out and I'll give it just a little bit of a little bit of gas as I straighten the wheel, and then just another dab of the brakes. You can see that one's barely getting to 100% on the brake bar. The trick here is obviously in the timing, and that just takes practice. You cannot be turning too much when you apply these brakes, otherwise you're going to upset the balance of the car and throw it all over the place and into the wall. So you really have to be precise about when and where that brake application occurs in order to get this right. There's just a moment there between these two corners when the wheel is straight. That's when you want to be braking, and you want to be off of it very quickly so that you can accomplish the turn into the left-hander. If you're still on the brakes at all, when you start making this left, you are going to spin the back end right around in front of you. So let's go full speed, and I'll show you what that looks like. Hopefully that makes sense. But it has to be very quick and very precise. Um, that is a This is another corner, the left-hander, where when you're newer at the track, you probably need to be taking it in first gear. Hey, Trans, how you doing, bud? Um, it's definitely the much safer way to do it because the timing of this is so delicate. Initially, you're going to need the engine braking to slow you enough to be able to confidently make this left-hander consistently. Dude, are you doing a nauseatingly detailed lap guide of Bathurst? Or are you racing somewhere? Hope somebody gets something from it. Um, okay, so if you're newer and you don't have the confidence yet, stick to first gear on the left-hander here. Let the engine braking help you. You'll be more consistent that way, and you'll have a much better chance of surviving the race. But if it's another one of those corners where if you're getting to a point where you need to start looking for ways to find time in your lap, um, learning how to do this and hold second gear throughout is absolutely crucial because that engine braking is if you drop into first, that engine braking is costing you time. So practice this to get the timing right so that you can hold it in second gear and not be losing speed through the left-hander. That's actually a good one to do a comparison, just so you can see what it costs you. One of the things that I do when I'm looking to improve on my lap times, I watch the pros a lot. You know, I watch the esports guys and the aliens, and see how they're getting around the track. And one of the things I'll look at to find out where I'm losing time is what our relative speed is at the apex of a corner, right? So here, you know, I'm dropping down to right around like 91 kilometers per hour is my lowest speed when I'm going through this left-hander. If you're still taking it in first gear, um, replay a lap and see how low your speed gets here. And you can see that it's frequently 10, 20 kilometers an hour, you know, difference that you might see depending on the corner. It can be really eye-opening and a good indication that, okay, I need to start trying to work to a point where I can maintain a higher gear through this corner because it's costing me. It's a great way to find time if that's what you're looking for. Let's see. So flat out from this point, once you get settled coming out of the dipper, you'll go flat out and hold it. I will try to I will try to get as far to the left here as I can because I want to open up both of these next corners as much as possible. Let's see. Let's go down towards the apex of the left-hander so I can explain what it is I'm trying to do and why. Okay, I need to switch back to my normal view for a second for this to make sense. What do I want? Okay, yeah. So this is a view that I drive in, right? Let me get it up here to the apex. Okay, so on your left-hand side here, on the wall. You'll see both the Bentley logo and the 100 extraordinary years mark, right? As soon as I get to right here and that 100 comes into view, unless I've made a serious mistake and have to make some sort of adjustment, that's my cue to go full throttle. Okay, so as soon as that comes in, you'll see me go full throttle, or at least try to. And with any luck, it'll put me as close to the wall on the right-hand side without hitting it as possible, which that's not bad. You know, I've probably got just a little bit more room there, but that's not a bad look at it. Okay, so now let's work backwards. In order to accomplish that, to to know that I can go full throttle as soon as I hit that 100 mark, I have to have the car positioned so that I can do that, right? Which means the car has to be rotated by the time I hit that little mark on the wall. In order to do that, I have to do a couple of things. One, I have to be pretty far over here to the right initially. And let's go back to the steering wheel. So if you are in the middle of the track or any further to the left, you're never going to be able to do that because you're going to have to overslow the car, and you're going to have to take much longer to get the car rotated and then wait in order to get fully on the accelerator. So you want to be farther over to the right, at least the middle of the track, and probably even further, to be honest with you. So I am trying to get over to the right side of the track right here. My brake pressure is, again, probably 80 to maybe 90% tops. I consider this more of a long braking zone rather than a really hard braking zone. It's You can't really tell it from the brake trace, but let's say if I could mimic it, my brake pressure is probably initially, we'll call it 85%, just for grins. I don't hold that though. I start coming off of that brake pressure very gradually and very early. And you'll see the brake bar begin to drop as I trail brake into this corner. And there's no question that this is the corner that I commit to a full and complete trail brake for the longest time out of any other corner on the track. And the reason is that I'm trying to get the nose pointed as early as possible so that I can pick up the throttle right at that 100 sign, right? So to get it to there fully rotated, I have to be rotating it all the way through, and that starts from the right side of the track, and carries all the way through to the apex. If you over brake here, you'll have the ABS chattering on you a lot, right? You will pitch the car even further forward than you want to, and more than you have to be honest with you. You want to keep the back end as low as you possibly can, understanding that you're actually going downhill and it's going to be higher than normal anyway. But you don't want to exaggerate that any more than you absolutely have to. So I think you need to play with your brake pressure here and start trying to ease off of the amount of brake that you're applying, even though it goes against every instinct that you have at this point. Your instinct is telling you brake, 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 and brake hard in order to slow the car enough to get it turned. But I think that's actually not what you want to do. I think you need to back off on your brake pressure a little bit and start backing off even more sooner than what you think, in order to keep that back end squatted down as much as possible. That keeps the car flat, and improves your overall braking performance so that you don't have the back end moving around on you as you begin your turn in and start to trail brake. Okay, so I hope that makes some sense. It's the best way I can think of to explain it. But so the whole goal here is to keep the car as flat as possible with as little brake pressure as possible. Trail brake heavily into this apex, and then pick up the throttle at the 100 marker. And that is why I'm as far to the left over here as I can get before I begin my turn in. Excellent. Thanks, Trans. Um, because I when I get on the brakes, I want to be done turning, right? So I want to open this corner up as much so that I can get over to the right side, get the car straightened up so that when I get on the brakes, it's not moving around on me any more than is absolutely necessary. Let's see. If you find yourself getting too far over to the left after you make this right-hander, so that it forces you to overslow going into the left-hander, then this is where I would take a look at what you're doing. Either you're not getting far enough to the left over here. Another possibility. Whoops, almost did that. I think another mistake that's easy to make here, from the standpoint of putting your car in the position that you want it, if you're too far to the right, you're never going to be able to get the car over to the right on the exit of this corner, right? So you've got to be over here far enough to the left in order to do that. The other tricky part, though, is figuring out exactly where to turn in, because once you decide that you want to get over to the right side on the exit here, it's very easy to delay your steering input too much to really try and open this corner up. I think you'll find that that you'll reach a certain point where that no longer becomes effective. And the reason it hurts, so let's say I was a couple of feet further to the left right here than I am. What's going to happen is it's going to require me to use more steering angle for a longer time in order to get the car to the right hand side. So what happens is as soon as you go over the hump that's up here, okay, so imagine that I have come from further from the left, and the car is still turning more than mine is now, right? So I am beginning to straighten up. But if I come in from too wide and try to come in more shallow here, you're going to have to hold the steering angle for a little bit longer. Where you run into problems because of that is that as soon as you get to this point, you're going to get on the brakes. And if you haven't finished all of your steering, the back end of the car is going to fly right around on you, right? Because you've just completely unloaded the back end. So it's something that you'll have to play with to figure out exactly what the right point is for you to arrive here, which is essentially dead straight over to the right as you begin applying the brake, right? That's the goal that you're looking for. And what I'm saying is be a little bit careful about turning in too late to get to this point, or your steering will screw you up right here at this point. Okay, so anyway, that's the entire complex of what I'm doing. So let's go back and watch it at full speed. Last thing I want to look at is, because I don't think I did, is how obvious the trail break is and how long I sustain it. The view's messed up, so you're not going to be able to see the 100 very well, but there it is right there. So that's the top of the mountain. Move to the left here, and my breaking point is just past the 150 marker. As I've gotten better at this track and at this corner in particular, I have found that I'm able to push it deeper and deeper. And this is another great place for you to look for time if you're struggling at this track and don't know where to find it. Let's see. One thing I want to point out real quick though is okay. So using the 150 marker as your reference, you'll have to adjust this depending on what field of view that you use. But you know as well as I do that at some point the chance of these signs being destroyed is extremely high, and you won't have a break reference anymore to use. So from my view, there's a couple of things that I can use. On your left, see the yellow crane that is just now passing out of sight, and also the black Fanatec sign on the left-hand side. The advantage of them is that they're on the left, which is much more in line with where you want to be looking, which is toward the apex, right? So you don't want to be looking for something off to the right. I find those work pretty well, and you should see just as I'm getting to the Fanatec sign, that's when my breaking point is. So when when the 150 marker inevitably gets knocked down, that sign or the crane, depending on where you break personally, can be an excellent braking reference. So just for anyone who has been befuddled about what to do when that gets knocked down. Okay, this is another one where I want you to watch the transition from throttle to brake, right? It should essentially be instantaneous. This is not an area where you want to be bashful on the brakes. You want to be hard on them, and you want to be hard on them instantaneously. Okay? The quicker you can get on them, don't be bashful about it. Let the ABS do its job. That's what it's there for. Okay, so just past the 150 marker is where my braking point is, and I am going to, as I downshift a second, and I'll take this in second. As I downshift a second, I'm going to be trying to hold the car out to the right-hand side for essentially as long as I can, because this is another curb that if you catch it, it will upset the car, and it's either going to spin you at worst, or or at the very least force you to back off, make an adjustment, get on the throttle late. It's going to cost you time. So this is very similar in a sense to the way that I approach turn one, in that I don't really trail brake much for it. I just get the car slowed, chuck it in, and try to pick up the throttle as quickly as I can. Hold out to the right. Keep braking. Then let it go. Chuck it in. My eyes, once again, do not go to the curb, but to the painted white line. I am trying to trace that with the front end rather than trying to avoid the curb. I am positively trying to follow the white stripe, and that helps me enormously. I don't catch this nearly as often as I used to. Um, the Let's go back and put it on the correct view and look at it at full speed. There's nothing gentle about that turn in, and I think that's the point that I'm trying to make on this turn, turn one, and the last turn that we'll get to in just a second. There's nothing that I consider particularly, smooth as fast about it. This is very much hard, harsh, quick inputs where I'm just chucking the car. Um, and I think this is another one where you are better to be a little bit long on your brakes than you are to be a little bit short. Um, because of that curb on the inside. It's just like I talked about on turn one. I want to avoid it, so I would rather brake a meter too late than a meter too early. Hold, 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 chuck it, get back on the gas. Soon as soon as I feel the back end, grip up, then I'm going back to full throttle. Sometimes it'll slide on me just a hair, and I have to modulate my throttle so that I don't lose the car. But really, that's all there is to it. Chuck it in, wait for the rotation to stop, the back end to grip up, and I'm hard back on the throttle and back to the right, and it's full throttle through this point. And then this turn, very similar to the last one and to turn one. I'm trying to brake. It's another area where I would rather brake a meter too late than a meter too early. It's very, very hard and harsh on the brake input, the steering input, and the throttle input. Nothing particularly smooth about it. I'm trying to avoid the curb on the left-hand side, and I would rather be a little bit wide than a little bit narrow. So and just past the 100-meter board. And like the other ones, I'm watching the white line, not the curb. Generally speaking, though, what I would say is that when the car hits the end of the red and white striping on the left, that is where I can usually go back to full throttle. This is a bit of a slippery corner, though, so you do have to be a little cautious with it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what my 101.7 looks like. And yes, that is without a doubt my new personal best. Okay, let's back up and look at it from the helicopter view, just so you can see the lines. And we'll do the full lap with the steering wheel and the inputs. And that's it. 2018. I'll take it. I think there's 2015 in there at least if I really started pushing it. Everything I've shown you is what I consider my race lap, with the exception of the earlier shift up to fifth gear up on top of the mountain, where I would normally stay in fourth gear. Otherwise, that's how I do my race laps. I think that just by watching that overhead view, I can see where there's more track here and there where I could be using and pushing it a little bit harder. Um, but that'd probably take some time because I would crash a lot more. So that's thanks, Trans. I appreciate that. I hope somebody finds this useful. I know the mountain is a serious pain in the ass, and it's just hard. Um, and if this gives you a different way to think about it, approach it, then I really hope it does. If anybody watches this and you have any questions about it, that you want to ask me, just shoot me a DM, and we can chat about it. I don't have any issue with that at all. But otherwise, that's it for me tonight. I've done what I came here to do, and I'm pretty happy. So I'll see you guys later. Don't know if I'll stream the next couple of days for anything, but I'll definitely be back on Sunday for our race here at Bathurst. So until then, I'll see you later. Have a good night. Take care, everybody.